So for my research project, I chose to do the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. So we'll jump right into the disaster itself. So Chernobyl was a nuclear energy power plant in Soviet-controlled Ukraine at the time. And on April 26, 1986, an uncontrolled reaction during an emergency systems check, where they basically turned everything off that would help keep any disaster from occurring. Um, they did, and thus the reactor basically went into large malfunction and blasted the roof off the reactor, releasing plumes of radiation and chunks of radioactive debris miles away. Um, Also, as you can see, it basically tore the building apart and released somewhat of this nuclear fallout ash across miles and miles of the Ukrainian landscape. So the environmental issues associated with this were catastrophic. Um, as you can see, the nuclear meltdown sent about 3 billion curies, which is about a measurement of radiation, into the atmosphere at the time of the initial destruction. This nuclear fallout made Chernobyl and the surrounding area, which is about 50 kilometers now, based on current research, uninhabitable for about 20,000 years. Uh, this threat to the water supply, um, because all this nuclear fallout went into the atmosphere, was blown across much of continental Europe and deposited into the Baltic and Black Seas. Um, but however, most of this nuclear fallout remained on land, and thus we were given the red forests, as you can see in these pictures here, how the forest turns this bright red color. This is from nuclear radiation. But it was estimated that about 23 TBQs, another measurement for radiation, was released in the Black Sea, and 300 TBQs was released into the Baltic Sea. Um, from this fallout. However, these numbers are relatively low compared to the current or the former or the current, but now past Fukushima disaster, which we'll talk about later on in this project. The sociological issues that this disaster created were an increase in cancer rates from acute radiation exposure, massive health effects long term. But it also led many researchers to find that environmental awareness was increased directly after this, but many lifestyles remained consistent, um, which is quite concerning, as any um, environmental change, lifestyles must be adjusted. In this graph I have here, you can see the increase in childhood thyroid cancer from the Chernobyl incident. You can see how much they raised. It rose in Russia specifically because many of the responders were Russian soldiers and scientists. So in the next slide, I have the Fukushima disaster. It happened in 2011, and it was the cause of an earthquake slash tsunami, which led to a failure of the plant's backup systems and basically called a giant meltdown of the reactors. As you can see the nuclear fallout was widespread, and this graph at the lower part was from NOAA and shows the nuclear radiation which leaked into the Pacific Ocean at the time of the meltdown, with having further effects on our environment. So the future threat that Chernobyl poses is with increasing temperatures and climate change, threatens Chernobyl's basic stability. Wildfires now are the main threat, which are capable of releasing millions of particles of nuclear fallout that were trapped in the forests. And as of 2020, there have been massive wildfires that have been spreading across Chernobyl, which are releasing plumes of radioactivity back into the atmosphere. In relation to our class, it talks about social and political environmental justice and how many minorities are exposed to these toxic industries and living conditions.